In this presentation, we will continue on with our comprehensive proprietorship problem, now looking at the financial statements. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info. Before we go into the creation of the financial statements, the balance sheet, the income statement, and the statement of equity, focusing here more specifically on the balance sheet and more specifically still the asset portion of the balance sheet, let's take a look at where we have what we've done so far and the tabs that we have gone through. So we're currently in the financial statement tab. We started this whole process out in the journal entries tab. I'm going to go back there just to tell the story of what we've done so far. We've entered the information into the general journal during our normal process. This being what the financial statement or the financial process, the accounting department does most of the time. We record transactions and enter that transactions into the system to eventually get to where we are now, the end product, the financial statements that we are going to be creating. We created the trial balance from the general ledger. We then moved to the adjusting process. I'm going to move to the next tab, the adjusting entries tab, where we took that information that we had compiled and now just renamed it, calling it the unadjusted trial balance. And then we put our end of the period adjustment entries in, those planned adjustments, those adjustments we need in order to make the end product, the adjusted financial statements, as close to accurate on an accrual basis as possible. Now that we have the adjusted trial balance, that's what we're going to use, those numbers being as accurate as possible to create the finished product, that being the financial statements. That's where we are at now. We're just going to take that adjusted trial balance. We're going to the financial statement tab where we have the adjusted trial balance here, and we're just going to use this to create our financial statements. So note that the adjusted trial balance is in balance. We can see that because the debits minus the credits equal 0. And that's just another way to say the double entry accounting system works. All we're doing is reformatting the puzzle now from a debit and credit format to a plus and minus format to an accounting equation format, just as we've done up top here. Assets are all the green accounts, liabilities are all the orange accounts, and equity are all the blue accounts. So we know it works because this assets equal liabilities plus equity is the balance sheet, which will end in assets equal liabilities plus equity. So we've already done the conversion here. I mean, it's right here. That's this, and this. So we know it has to work. All we're going to do now is break out a bit more detail. We're going to break out each of these accounts, find a home separately for each of these accounts, find a home separately for each of these accounts, find a home separately for each of these accounts. And once we do so, we will be in balance. It's going to be great. Okay, so we're going to enter that information over here into the balance sheet. Also note that we are starting off with the balance sheet, and that's a little bit controversial. If we talk to, or if we look at many textbooks, they'd say we have to do the income statement first, and then the owner's equity, and then the balance sheet. And if you see a test question, it may actually have that as a test question. You have to do it that way. But note that if you have a well-formatted balance sheet and a well-formatted trial balance, I think it's better to start with the balance sheet because the balance sheet is everything. The balance sheet is the whole story. It's where we're at. It's assets equal liabilities plus equity. It is the double entry accounting system component. It also helps to start from top to bottom, meaning it's useful to look at the trial balance and say, I'm just going to go straight from top to bottom. We're going to go the cash first, or the assets first, and then liabilities, and then we'll do the equity portion as we go to the other statements of the income statement and equity statement. So for that reason, I think it's better. Now, the reason that it's argued that it should go the other way is because the income statement, in order to get this equity section over here, you need to be able to work out this whole component, the blue component, to one number, meaning net income is here, which are all here, these numbers, and then the capital account. So really what's going to be on the equity section is the sum of all these numbers, 103,600. And you could argue, well, we need to do the income statement to get what net income is, and then we need to do the statement of equity in order to get what total equity is, in order to make this number on the balance sheet. But obviously, if you have a well-formatted trial balance, and you're working in Excel particularly, we can just highlight all these numbers, and it'll give us the number right there. So I would rather get this number first and then break out the detail, because I think that's going to be easier for us to see, for us to do, give us more sense of confidence to be in balance, and then just find the detail of this number. And even if you're doing this by paper and pencil, I would still argue that that would be a good way to go. But to do that, you'd have to say the credits minus the debits and just put it in the calculator and see if this works, and then go through the details. So that's the argument for going this way. So now we're going to start through here. We're going to go for the asset portion first. So we're just going to take these green accounts and put them over here in the asset section. When we think about assets, we typically break them out into subcategories of current assets and property, plant, and equipment. Current assets are going to be those that are going to be more liquid, more close to cash, things that we're going to consume relatively soon within the process of doing business. So if we go through these, we just need to determine then which are current and which are not. Now, normally the trial balance is going to be in order by the more current assets on top. So it's not in order by alphabetical order, it's in order by the more current assets on top. So cash is clearly current. The accounts receivable, current. Supplies is current. Prepaid rent would be, but there's a zero there, so it's current, but we probably don't need it because there's a zero in it. And then prepaid insurance is typically current because this is a year policy, remember? So that's current. And then equipment, not current, because we're going to be using that for like 5 years or so. So all of these are current. So to represent that it's going to be under the current asset portion, we do that with a current assets and then colon to represent that we will have a subcategory. We could then copy and paste these over, or we could type them in here. That would be fine. I'm going to use a formula to do this. So within cell G5, we're just going to say equals and point to the words. We can use words in our formula, which is nice, and enter, and it'll just pull over the cash. And then we're just going to go to the accounts receivable, equals the accounts receivable, and enter, pulls over accounts receivable. Now we're going to go to supplies, equals the supplies, and enter, pulls over the supplies. Prepaid rent, we don't need it because it's zero. We're going to remove that, skipping it, equals instead the prepaid insurance, and enter. That's where we stop. Now you might be saying, hey, can we use autofill when we are using words instead of numbers? We can. So we'll show you how to do that real quick. I'll just delete these and do it again in a different format just for Excel purposes. If we put our cursor on cash, we use the little autofill button over here, little box of autofill, and just highlight it down. Auto drives it down. Dr. Phil does the calculations. Now note what happens here, of course, though, is that adds prepaid rent because we can't skip it with autofill. So if we do that, we got to say, I want to eliminate this one now. So I'm going to delete prepaid rent. I need to move prepaid insurance up. So I'm just going to delete it and then put our cursor in G8 equals prepaid insurance. Now, whatever way you want to do that is fine. You could type them in there. The formulas aren't as important. You can copy and paste in this component. Okay, so then notice that it's also formatted as a subcategory by the indentations. So that's another rule. It's going to be formatted as a subcategory. We will also indicate it's a subcategory by putting these numbers into the inner column rather than the outer column. Note that these two columns do not represent debits and credits here. There are no debits and credits on the balance sheet, on any of the financial statements. That's the point. Debits and credits are more easier to work with if you know how they work. Difficult to work with when you don't know how they work. Our goal here is to present things to people that don't know how they work. And so that's why we're going to put the plus and minus format, a bit more bulky format, but a format more widely readable. So we are in cell H5, where we're going to say equals and point to that 36,100, pulling over the amount, enter. In cell H6, same process, we're going to say equals, now pointing to the accounts receivable 8,000 number. In cell H7, once again, equals, pointing to the supplies. And then in cell H8, one more time, skipping the prepaid rents, you'll note, and go into the 11,000 for prepaid insurance. Now, once again, could we do that faster just for Excel purposes? We could. We could do the autofill. So I'm gonna delete these and do it one more time with the autofill. So we'll delete that, put our cursor on the 36,000 on the little autofill item here, Left click, drag down, auto drives it down, Dr. Phil does the calculations. Now, of course, we still have that same problem of this 0 here, picking up the wrong number because we skipped a cell. We didn't want to include that number on our financials. Therefore, we need to delete this and say equals, point to the 11,000, and enter. Now I'm going to go ahead and underline this, go into the Home tab, Font Group, and Underline. And then we'll just sum these up to the outer column, and when we sum that up, we will indicate that it's a subcategory one more time by indenting 2 times and putting total current assets. So we started total current assets, colon, indented, saying, hey, it's a subcategory, and hey, it's a subcategory because it's in the inner column, and then, hey, we're totaling up the subcategory because we're going to indent it twice and put it in the outer column. So we'll be in the outer column. We're just going to say the 36,100 plus the 8,000 plus the 5,000 plus the 11,000 adds up to 60,100. We're going to put that here with the sum function, our favorite function, by in cell I9 saying equals and SUM. Double click that sum function, highlight from the 36,100 down to the 11,000, and enter. So there's the 60,100. We can always double check that if we have a well-formatted trial balance, as we do over here, by just highlighting these cells and seeing Excel just says, yeah, it should be 60,100. I'm pretty confident with that number. That's good. If there's something wrong with our balance sheet being in balance, probably not that 61,100's fault. So then we're going to go down to the next component, which is property, plant, and equipment, where we're going to put these last 2 asset accounts in, which is equipment and accumulated depreciation. So we're just going to do the same thing in G12, equals, and point to the equipment, and enter. We'll note what we have here, property, plant, and equipment, colon. It's going to be a subcategory, in other words. Then we have it indented, saying, once again, it's a subcategory of property, plant, and equipment. And then we're going to do the second one. I'm going to do this a little bit incorrectly now, show you the common error made, and then we will correct it. So see if you see the problem here. So we're going to say equals and point to the accumulated depreciation, enter. And then we're going to pull this into the inner column again. We're going to pull these into the inner column. I'm in H12. We're going to say equals and point to the 60,000, enter. And then I don't want this negative in my formulas because that represents a credit. I want to flip the sign. I don't want debits and credits here. This is a plus and minus format. So to flip the sign, instead of hitting equals, I'm going to put negative of that number, which will take that number and flip the sign. And enter. Then I'm going to underline this. We're going to go to the Home tab, Font, Underline, possibly done for you already. And then I'm going to sum this up here. So I'm going to sum these up. Again, bit of a problem here. Let's see if you can see what's going on. We're going to say equals SUM. Double click the sum function. Highlight these 2 and enter. I'm going to call that total property, plants, and equipment, further representing the fact that it is a subcategory represented by the colon, the indentation, the double indentation, and the bringing it to the outer column. So then we're just going to sum this up. We're going to sum these 2 items up. And to do that, so we're going to add up the outer column. I'm going to do that with the sum function equals the sum of this number down to this number. There's blank numbers in the middle. That's okay. Maybe it's okay. Sum of these items. And there we have it. Now note what we didn't do here. We never went and did something with multiple columns when we used a function. In other words, this is adding up the 1 column. We didn't jump from this column back to this column. This is adding up 1 column over here. We didn't jump from this column to this column. This is adding up 1 column, this column. So that's always going to be kind of the case. We're not usually going to be jumping around when we do some type of calculation in the financial statements. Now, if we highlight over here and say, if I highlight the entire thing, and if it's well formatted, I should just be able to highlight it and say, it should add up to 119,100. Ours adds up to 121,100. There's a difference. What's that difference? Well, the 121,100 minus the 119,100. That doesn't look right. The 119,100 is 2,000. Now, oftentimes what happens is we went the wrong way with something. We added when we should have subtracted. So if I divide by 2, we can also often see that problem. If it's only one number that's off, that's gone the wrong way, 1,000 looks like that 1,000. That's our problem. Common problem, most common problem with the asset portion of the balance sheet. What happened? Well, you can see here it's a contra asset, it's a credit. So it's not going to increase the assets, it's decreasing the assets. Why is it a contra asset? Because it's related to equipment. So it's really bringing this number down, but we broke the credit out into its own category, accumulated depreciation. So because of that, we're not going to really call this, I'm going to change the name here and type in less accumulated depreciation. So we want to tell our reader, hey, this is a subtraction problem. We're not going to do that. I'm not going to do it with a negative sign here. We're going to do it by words, less accumulated depreciation. Now, note that some financials may put a minus sign here, or they may not. That's not really standardized everywhere. Probably most financial statements will include the word less if they have a negative or not. Also note that sometimes we use subtraction signs or a word less, and sometimes we don't. Meaning, like for the income statement, when we calculate net income, we're not going to put revenue minus expenses. We're not going to put less expenses, and we're not going to put a negative sign for expenses. We expect people to know that. And here, we're just going to put the word less and not a sign. So you just got to be kind of aware of the types of things that financial statements can do in those situations. So if we do a subtraction problem here, the 60,000 minus the 1,000, 59,000 calculated as equals in I-14, this number 60,000 minus the 1,000 giving us 59,000, bringing this total then to 119, which if we add up all the numbers on the trial balance is 119,100. So that looks good. So in other words, we can be fairly confident that the assets are correct now. If our assets do not equal liabilities plus equity, it's probably not the assets side fault. So we can narrow down each component, be as sure as we can on each component, be more likely then to have it correct the first time, or at least be able to go back and fix it in the most efficient, time efficient way. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info.